The man accused of being involved in Tupac Shakur's murder has spoken out from prison for the first time. His name is Dwayne "Kef" D. Davis, and he claims he wasn't even close to the scene when the rapper was killed. He says he was 300 miles away, and now he's blaming someone else for the shooting. For almost 30 years, fans believed Tupac's legacy was in good hands. His mother, Tupac Shakur, was known for being a strong and passionate protector of his music, image, and everything he stood for. After Tupac's death, albums were still being released, and many people believed those albums reflected Tupac's real message. Fans trusted the people who were in charge of his estate, thinking they had Tupac's best interests in mind. But recently, things took a dark turn. Police carried out a search as part of a new investigation into Tupac's long unsolved murder. What they found didn't match what fans expected. Instead of rare music or personal items, investigators uncovered troubling evidence that pointed to something much deeper. It wasn't just about missing songs. It suggested betrayal from people who were supposed to protect Tupac's legacy. The discovery shook fans and gained worldwide attention. On his show, Tucker Carlson commented that the issue wasn't just about lost music. It was about lies and theft. His words sparked a major public reaction and made people question what had really been happening since Tupac's death. Most people know about the tragic night Tupac was gunned down in Las Vegas, but few know what happened afterward. His family had to take control of his estate, his music, money, and personal belongings. At first, it seemed simple. His mother, Afeni, stepped in to make sure everything was handled with care. She became the face of Tupac's legacy and made sure his message stayed alive. Afeni was seen as a strong and wise woman. She worked hard to keep her son's memory and voice alive by helping release posthumous albums. These albums allowed Tupac's words to reach new generations. Publicly, it looked like she was fully in charge, showing up at events, giving speeches, and making sure the story of her son's life and work was told the right way. But behind the scenes, the reality may have been different. People in the music business started getting involved. They began making deals and signing contracts, saying they were helping the Shakur family. But some now wonder whether their real intentions were about helping or about personal gain. In the early years after Tupac's death, several people from the music industry stepped in, offering to help manage his business affairs. They said they understood how to handle complicated legal issues, music rights, and contracts. They promised the Shakur family they would take care of everything properly. These individuals seemed professional and experienced, having worked with other famous artists before. The family believed they were doing the right thing by trusting these people. But something else was going on that most fans didn't see. While the public thought Tupac's mother, Afeni, was making all the important decisions, these business managers were quietly working in the background. They were setting up companies, signing deals, and moving money around, often without much attention. Everything seemed normal from the outside. Albums like the Don Killuminati, The 7-Day Theory, and Still I Rise continued to come out. Tupac's songs played on movie soundtracks, and his influence on hip-hop only grew. Fans were happy because it felt like Tupac was still alive through his music. But in the background, lawyers and business people were busy with paperwork. They were creating legal agreements and business structures that determined who really owned Tupac's music and where the money would go. These were not public deals or announcements. They were the kind of detailed legal documents that only professionals fully understood. While the Shakur family was mourning and trying to protect Tupac's legacy, they were also being pulled into complex business decisions. They had no choice but to depend on those experts, hoping they were doing what was right. Meanwhile, important items like master recordings, original tapes, and Tupac's personal belongings were being quietly moved. These were claimed to be stored for safekeeping. One of the places these items were taken to was a private garage, which stayed locked and untouched for many years. No one outside the inner circle knew exactly what was kept there or why it was hidden. That garage became part of a much bigger story about what really happened to Tupac's music and legacy. Then something major happened years later. On June 1, 2008, a massive fire broke out at Universal Music Group's storage facility in Los Angeles. The fire didn't just damage buildings, It destroyed what many considered irreplaceable pieces of music history. At first, the full extent of the loss wasn't clear. But later reports revealed that thousands of master recordings had likely been destroyed in the fire, including recordings from some of the world's most famous artists. The fire started when a security guard noticed smoke during his usual rounds. But by the time firefighters got there, the flames had already spread too far. What made this fire different from others was the content it destroyed. These weren't just backup files or regular tapes, they were master recordings, the original versions of songs that artists had recorded in studios. These were the exact recordings used to create the final versions of albums and singles we all know. At first, Universal Music Group downplayed the damage. They said the fire was under control quickly and that most of their archives were safe. But over time, the truth started to emerge. The warehouse that burned had been holding a massive amount of original music. The loss was much larger than anyone had guessed. Artists who had worked with Universal began to worry that their life's work was gone forever. Some weren't even sure if backup copies existed anywhere else. Tupac Shakur's estate was especially concerned. If his original recordings had been stored there, they might have been lost in the fire too. The silence from the company only made people more suspicious and anxious. It raised painful questions. Who was truly protecting Tupac's legacy? Had irreplaceable pieces of his music been destroyed without anyone telling the family? What else might have been hidden away, misplaced, or lost? This fire, along with the hidden garage and quiet business deals, created a new layer of mystery and concern around Tupac's story. What was once thought to be a carefully protected legacy now seemed far more vulnerable than anyone had imagined. The famous rapper Tupac Shakur had created a large amount of music during his career. Many of his unreleased songs were believed to be kept at Universal Music Group's storage facilities. His mother, Afeni Shakur, worked hard for years to protect and preserve his music and legacy. So when people began to think that some of his recordings may have been lost in the 2008 fire, it was heartbreaking. But as investigators looked more closely into the fire, they found something surprising. The burned building only held about 5% of Universal's total collection of music. Most of the valuable recordings were actually stored in other places around the world. That meant the fire wasn't as destructive as it first seemed. Pat Krause, the head archivist at Universal, led a major review of their collections. His team went through over 150,000 items and responded to nearly 400 questions from worried artists. Their results showed that less than 0.1% of Universal's entire music archive had been damaged. And for artists like Tupac, there were digital versions or backup copies of nearly everything. This should have been a relief. But instead, it led to more questions. If the fire hadn't destroyed much, why did Universal stay so quiet about what happened? Why didn't they immediately check their other storage areas or inform the artists involved? What else were they hiding? As the investigation continued, something even more unexpected came to light. While checking other storage spaces, investigators found records showing that some very valuable items had been moved before the fire even started. Some recordings were quietly transferred to different locations months ahead of the fire. That by itself wasn't suspicious, but it raised questions about who made those decisions and why. One of the biggest surprises came when they discovered that several boxes linked to Tupac Shakur's estate had been moved to a small private storage facility in Los Angeles. The place used to be a garage that Tupac owned when he was alive. He had once used it to store his cars and personal items. After his death, however, it became a secret storage spot for very important materials. In the months before the fire, Tupac's belongings had been moved to this garage without much attention. There weren't many records about what was moved, and even the lawyers managing his estate weren't told much. The official explanation was that it was for security, to keep the most valuable items in a safer, more private place. The garage had been updated with climate control systems and modern security, so it appeared to be a secure facility. But when investigators finally entered the garage, what they found was nothing like what they expected. They thought the materials would be neatly labeled and carefully organized. Instead, they walked into a messy, crowded space that looked more like an old, forgotten warehouse. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, items were scattered around, and it was clear that things had been sitting there untouched for a long time. What they found inside this hidden garage turned out to be more important than anything lost in the Universal fire. It wasn't just about missing music anymore. It was about how Tupac's legacy had been handled behind closed doors. For years, this place had held parts of his life and career that no one outside a small circle knew about. Now that it was finally uncovered, it raised serious questions about who had been responsible, what had really been protected, and what had been hidden away for all these years. Many of the storage boxes found in the garage were covered in dust, and it looked like some hadn't been touched or opened in many years. This didn't seem like a place meant for short-term storage. It had clearly become a permanent hiding spot. Right away, investigators noticed that everything was messy and unorganized. Unlike a proper music archive, there was no system for how things were stored. Boxes were stacked randomly, and most weren't labeled correctly. Some containers held music recordings, while others had personal letters, photos, and important business papers. It looked like someone had moved everything in a hurry, without taking the time to sort or document it. As the team started going through the materials, they found documents that should have been part of Tupac's official estate records. These included contracts, bank records, and legal paperwork that Tupac's family had never seen before. Some of these papers were from the 1990s when Tupac was still alive. Others were from after he passed away, during the time his estate was being set up. What shocked investigators most was a group of locked file cabinets that hadn't been opened in years. Inside these cabinets were copies of important legal documents. But when these were compared to the official estate files, investigators noticed major differences. Some contracts had different terms. Others showed different payment amounts. Some even had signatures that didn't match. This raised serious concerns. Had someone been keeping two separate sets of records, one official and one secret? Were the papers in the garage more accurate than the ones everyone thought were real? And most importantly, who had access to this garage and why were these documents hidden there? It also became clear that the garage wasn't completely abandoned. Logs from the security system showed that someone had been entering the garage regularly, often staying for long periods. But the records were incomplete. Many entries were hard to read, and some were missing entirely. Whoever was coming and going clearly didn't want to be identified. It started to look like this storage garage wasn't just a forgotten space. It was the center of a much bigger mystery involving Tupac's estate and how it had been handled after his death. One of the most powerful discoveries in the garage was a hidden collection of Tupac's music. These weren't just scraps of recordings or unfinished demos. These were completed, high-quality songs, fully produced tracks that could have easily been released to the public. Instead, they had been locked away for years, unknown to even the most devoted fans. Some of the songs included collaborations with other big-name artists. Others were solo tracks that showed Tupac's incredible writing and lyrical talent. The quality of the sound proved that these songs were finished and ready for release. What made them even more valuable was the subject matter. Many songs contained deeply personal lyrics, Tupac talking about his life, his pain, his dreams, and his view of the world. These recordings could have given fans new and meaningful insight into who Tupac really was. But it appeared that someone had made the decision to keep them hidden. Even worse, some of these unreleased songs had been used to create bootleg albums, illegal releases that weren't authorized by Tupac's estate. The money made from those albums didn't go to his family. Instead, it went to unknown people, possibly the same ones who had kept these recordings locked away. This added another painful layer to the story. Not only had important music been hidden, but someone had also been profiting from it in secret. More evidence was found in the form of recording contracts Tupac had signed before he died. These documents showed he was working on big projects with other artists and music companies. Projects that would have been worth millions of dollars. Legally, those projects should have remained the property of his estate. But the hidden paperwork suggested that the rights to some of this music had quietly been handed over to others, without proper approval or knowledge of the family. Studio logs found in the garage showed just how much work Tupac had done. He had recorded far more music than anyone knew. Some studio sessions resulted in several fully finished tracks, none of which had ever been released. Investigators realized that fans had missed out on years' worth of powerful, unreleased music from one of hip-hop's greatest voices. It was now clear that a huge part of Tupac's creative legacy had been hidden away on purpose. But the biggest question remained: who was responsible for this cover-up? What was their goal? As investigators looked deeper into the financial papers found buried with the music, they started to follow a money trail, a series of transactions and financial decisions that hinted at something even bigger and more disturbing. The story those documents told was complicated, hard to believe, and possibly even harder to fully uncover. People who've seen the financial documents found in the garage say they reveal a complicated system that secretly redirected millions of dollars made from Tupac Shakur's music, merchandise, and business deals. This setup seems to have lasted for many years. The money went through several layers of companies and bank accounts, making it nearly impossible to see where the money truly ended up. The system described in the papers was extremely complex. Sometimes, the money earned from just one song would be passed through multiple companies. Each company would take its own cut, fees, commissions, or management costs. By the time the money reached Tupac's family or estate, only a small portion remained. Meanwhile, the people managing these financial arrangements, such as his former managers and their associates, kept a much bigger share for themselves. Some of the companies involved didn't appear to be real businesses. According to the records, these were shell companies. They had official documents and working bank accounts, but no staff or actual business operations. Their main role was to quietly receive money, take a percentage, and then forward the rest to another company. In the garage, investigators found spreadsheets that tracked these money transfers in great detail. Whoever kept those records likely did so to stay on top of the system. If the documents are real, they could be the strongest evidence yet that a complex financial structure was used to take money away from Tupac's estate. What surprised people most was the amount of money involved. Based on careful review of the documents, experts estimate that millions of dollars were kept from Tupac's family and estate. Instead, the funds were moved into accounts controlled by former managers and their trusted group. It's unclear whether any laws were broken, but the structure of these deals clearly favored a small group of insiders. Tupac's family, on the other hand, was reportedly given financial reports that looked good on the surface. These statements were designed to seem normal and even hopeful. But the documents in the garage suggest that two sets of financial records may have existed, one to show the family, and another that showed where the money really went. One of the most troubling findings was how some of Tupac's biggest business deals after his death were written.